Okay, you may have thought I abandoned this series, but alas, I did not. The series definitely had a significant delay. It's been many months. I've lost track of the amount of months. I was planning on keeping it going like super consistently, like one or two a week probably. But alas, life got in the way. I had less and less time to watch shows. I was dedicating the free time I did have to working on writing, working on getting through my game backlog, just things like that. I moved, just things that kept getting in the way of like me, actually sitting down and binging more classic Who. And alas, I'm back. So, in the time since I last watched, originally I was watching on BritBox, but I have since gotten access to a new service. I'm not going to disclose what that service is here for reasons that might still become apparent soon. But essentially, this is a service that lets you gain access to content from all streaming services. I'm not going to say what it is, and I'm not going to say how to acquire it. But alas, I canceled like pretty much all of my streaming subscriptions and switched to this service. And yeah, alas, I found that there was a lot more stories on this one that BritBox had, and I found that these are stories that were incomplete, that they don't have the complete film reels of. So essentially, they restored what they could of audio and used set photography to sort of piece it together as almost like a radio drama or an audio drama in a way. And the first one I encountered, so I decided, hey, these are on here. I have access to them now. Originally, I was just going to go by like what was available on BritBox, but I feel like I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't consume these stories as well. So the first one I stumbled upon was Marco Polo, which takes place, I think before, was the Keys of Marinus the last one I watched, or did I watch one? I can't remember. I think it takes place before the Keys of Marinus in the chronology, because I remember saying during my I was talking about Keys of Marinus that like they allude to adventures that we have not seen, which modern Doctor Who often does, but that was the first time that happened in Classic Who that I saw, at least. So I was like very interested to see if that was just like similar like storytelling technique to modern Who, or if it was just a matter of like those episodes were lost. So I knew there were some lost episodes, but yeah. So going into Marco Polo, I had to keep the context in mind that this was an incomplete story. It did not have the visuals. It had photography, which was interesting. Some of them were like color restored really shittily. Others, but like mostly this is an audio piece, and you have to try to kind of piece together what's going on mostly through the audio. And I didn't quite mind that. Honestly, I still enjoyed this story. I thought it was a pretty solid one. I didn't even think it was amazing or anything, but it's like a solid, like a middle of the road story, I would say. I think it went on a little too long. There were like a few episodes in the middle where it was kind of just like, it almost felt like the same shit happening on a loop. Like there was mysterious traitors amongst Marco Polo's party. Weird shit happening. Betrayals. Betraying the Khan, like all this stuff like that. And it just went through this loop for a few episodes where I'm like, okay, this is getting a little tedious. I understand like why it's here, but like, okay, let's wrap the story up. But it wrapped up pretty excitingly and satisfactory. I think something to keep in mind, especially around Classic Who and like media from this time, is that the best intentions are there. This is clearly started off as an educational series to try to expose people to different points in history and different obviously the future ones are more for entertainment and teaching like philosophical concepts, so to say, but like the past stories are like sort of like to teach kids about history, but yeah, there was some stuff that really with some portrayals. There was like, from what I can garner in the photos, a lot of white people portraying Asian characters. There were a lot of portrayals that were like pretty over the top and borderline racist portrayals, But for the most part, I feel like it was definitely still trying to be an educational piece and like opening up to that side of history and that side of the world. So it didn't really like for the most, like there was some stuff that I was like really like, oh, that's pretty sketchy, but like for the most part it didn't like cross that threshold into being offensive. I feel like it still tried to do like justice of like, oh, like explain like, oh, this is like a legitimate area of the world of culture, a part of history. Like it didn't cross that line into saying otherwise. I guess like it definitely treated a lot of the characters with respect. There's a lot of stuff in here that was kind of like very like origin-y slash blueprint-y for a lot of elements that like appear in modern Doctor Who, like the historical figure and sort of like how the encounter with the Doctors and companions influence them. And there's a cool framing device that's used in this story that of Marco Polo like chronicling these events in a journal of his that we see often. It like it's the framing device for the story, but it also appears often in the story, so it really grounds it and contextualizes it in that way, which is pretty cool. Yeah, like and it definitely sets the blueprints for like when in modern series when the Doctor and the companions meet a historical figure and like really like sort of shift like influence them and shift their work and shift their perspective. And I feel like this is kind of like the OG story for that, I would say. And it's interesting because like I wonder how much the creatives on Doctor like Modern Who had access to this story, especially since I feel like these stories, I could be definitely wrong, but I feel like these stories where we just have the audio were only restored fairly recently. If I'm correct, it could most definitely be wrong. So please, like I've compared to anyone, I have like very little knowledge of classic era Who. I'm much more steeped in modern. So this, I mean, after all, this is my first time watching all the classic stories. So yeah, feel free to comment below if I ever get anything like super wrong or you feel like need to like provide context or explain something, like obviously politely, but like I would love to hear in the comments below like any insight you might have. But yeah. So it's interesting to see that influence in the modern show. Another thing like that was like very modern Who-esque was the Doctor trying to play games to bargain for something with like I wouldn't say Kublai Khan was like an antagonist figure, but like almost like a challenging like an opposition figure, or like trying to play like games or outsmart or trick to riddle someone out of something. And this has happened a little bit, I think, throughout classic Who so far, but it's like something that's very prevalent in the modern series that I feel like the origins of that kind of behavior were kind of very much apparent here. So that was pretty cool to see. Like I love seeing these like little hints and bits and pieces because like the Doctor and his behaviors and like the way he treats his companions and treats other societies is so starkly different like at this point in the story, but you could still see like hints of what the Doctor would become and what Doctor Who as a whole series would become. Like you could still see those little hints trickling in it, so it's cool to notice those things and see those things despite the series being so starkly different so far. I felt like all of the companions were fairly stale this time around. I didn't think they had much of cool character moments or significance to do. I did like sort of Ian's kind of bonding with Marco Polo. I thought that was pretty cool. Like I did like that little moment there, but like not moment, I mean like that little like thread there, but for the most part like the companions felt very flat. Like it was really like Polo himself and the Doctor that kind of stood out in this story for me. But yeah, it was really frustrating that this was only left to audio and photography, because it would have been cool. Like really, I'm really interested to see how they handle these environments. Like there's vast travel through deserts, and they had to have captured this footage. I know it's lost, but like how do they convey that on set? I'm interested to see that. Is it like sort of like similarly to like the kind of like caveman wasteland they did in Unearthly Child? Is it something similar to that vibe? Like like it piques my piques my imagination to see like, oh, like, and I thought that was kind of cool actually for like this being mostly about audio based story right now. Yeah, like kind of piqued my imagination, like imagining, oh, how they conveyed this, what did this look like, how like it's cool in that sense, and imagining how they did that. And it's kind of unfortunate, or likely, unless someone discovers like a film reel lost in someone's basement or something, we'll likely never know. But it's cool what they did, and what they did to conserve and archive this story is very much appreciated, because if they didn't put this effort forth and gather the audio, compile it with photography and release it in this format, like otherwise the story would be completely lost to time. And it's like it would be a shame. It would be a shame. It's not one of my favorite stories by any stretch of the words, but it's solid, and it shows like cool history for the show. So I'm glad it was preserved, and glad You get to see it. I think next on my list, because obviously skipping over the Keys of Marinus since I've already watched and talked about it. But next on the list would be the Aztecs, which I have seen. It is one of the very few classic Who stories I had watched during my time originally watching the modern Who. Like they had random stories spackled on Netflix sometimes, and I would watch them. Like I watched the Three Doctors, I watched the Aztecs for sure, and I remember not really liking it. So we'll see like how it goes this time around. I was considering skipping it, but I'm like, you know what? No, I have to go through every story, even the ones I've seen. So yeah, well, next time I think we'll be talking about the Aztecs. I could, if I'm sorry if I missed one and could be wrong, but yeah, glad this series is back. Hopefully, I can keep it up more regularly. If it ends up falling into like gaps, I'm sorry, but yeah, it's a fun series to do, and I'm excited to keep moving forward on these adventures. So thanks for watching.